8:24.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Earl Rush. I'm with StuckOnSalsa.com. I want to thank everybody for coming out today to this fabulous event, the tribute to Frankie Martinez. Let's give a big hand for Frankie Martinez. Let's give a big hand for the producer of La Epica 1 and 2, Josue Joseph. I'm going to ask a couple of questions here, not too many, because I know after seeing the movie and everything, you guys really want to go out and dance. We got a great event up for you. Also, I'd like to give a special shout out. At the end of the movie, they showed some of the legends from the Palladium. We have one of the ladies here live, Miss Carmen Cruz. Let's give a big dear friends, the bassist player that was in the movie, Alfonso. I'd also like to thank my business partner, Kelvin Harris, for helping make this happen. Gary Sue for making this happen. Tanya Fisk for All right. We've got two questions for Mr. Martinez, and we have two questions for Josue, and then I'm going to open it up for the public. The first two questions are for Frankie Martinez. You guys bear with me. I'm getting old, and I don't have my glasses. Martinez. This question comes from a collective contribution from multiple dancers who asked Josue and Raquel to shed positive light on the On1 style. Question: as an On1 dancer, I've thought about switching to Salsa on 2, but it looks the same to me. Salsa on 2 dancers start on the first beat of the music and they end on the 7th, just like what we do on 1. I've been told that the difference in the change of direction and body movement, but after visiting several classes in New York, I don't see the difference. Can you explain and demonstrate this?
Yeah, I think that, I started dancing on 1, and I started dancing on 1 because I found an ad in the Yellow Pages. Back then it was Yellow Pages. And the ad in the Yellow Pages said salsa, so I went running over there, and it ended up being a ballroom school, and they were teaching me ballroom, and I was breaking on 1. There was a young Dominican man there that saw my frustration, because I was frustrated because I was going to the clubs and I was noticing that I wasn't doing what they were doing. That's not what they're teaching me over there. So he told me where I had to go to see what was going on. Even if it wasn't just to go and learn it somewhere else, but to get an idea that was closer to what it was that I was looking for, because I came into this through being in love with music. And my father kind of bred in me this love for Latin music and told me stories about going to visit the musicians and seeing these guys play the Battle of the Two Titos at Madison Square Garden with Tito Puente and Tito Rodriguez. And these stories gave me a certain feeling that was what made me fall in love with the music. And when I went looking for a way to express that, I found a method that wasn't necessarily quenching that feeling, wasn't necessarily giving me that feeling that my father was giving me. That's what I was looking for. And my father left my home when I was very comfortable on one, and dancing on two was a very kind of strange thing, and my body did not want to deal with it at first. But when I did have it, it felt, there was something, and I'll use this for lack of a better word, but there was something very sublime about how I felt while I was moving that way. And I later understood that that had to do with a couple of things. The difference is something that, you know, if you ask somebody who doesn't understand much about something to recognize a difference in it between something that they may be familiar with, it's very difficult for them because they haven't experienced it. And I think that, you know, experiencing it gives you a very clear idea of why it feels differently. It's not about necessarily that it looks different, because if you take anything that's meant to be danced to 4/4 timing and you dance it to music that has 4/4 timing, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the fact that you can do it. And a lot of the things that I think that you know, we do today in, you know, what we think is coming up with dance ideas and possibilities are random, right? And they're not necessarily musically based on anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing physical randomness that happens to work because we're doing it within an 8-beat structure that works with music that has an 8-beat structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it doesn't look different to the naked eye. It doesn't look different to the naked ear. And it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to ask somebody to get that by seeing it or experiencing it shallowly. What I started to realize, first of all, if you look at it, there's a lot of movement. I call it the Mac and PC. Right? If you look at it, there's a lot of people that start on PCs and then they end up getting a Mac and they go, wow, this is kind of cool, right? You don't get traffic in the other direction. You don't get people that start on Mac and then buy a PC. There's a lot of traffic, people starting on one and ending up on two, and they say, wow, this is what I've been looking for. There is zero traffic in the opposite direction. Not less, zero traffic. Now, what happened with me was that when I started this, I could dance on one, and when I saw the two, it was very difficult for me to make the switch, right? But once I did understand it, once it became comfortable to my body, I could dance with anybody on anything, because it was necessary for me to learn about music in order to dance on two. It was not necessarily necessary for me to learn about music in order to dance on one. There's something very musically elementary about dancing on one, because we're talking about the downbeat, we're talking about when things start, we're talking about what everybody kind of naturally hears automatically when you listen to music. You hear when things get going, right? And so that's when you want to dance it. Once you get, I'm going to start demonstrating. Once you get into the more specifics about Latin music, if you have percussionists, general musician percussionists, and you talk to them about reggae, they're going to tell you that there's a pulse in reggae on 3, right? This is kind of a that thing is what kind of gives reggae its identity. In music based on the song, there's a pulse on that second beat, and it's coming from all different types of places. The one is emphasizing the beginning of things, right, with the breaking step, with the step that changes direction, right? So you're emphasizing that beginning, but you don't recognize that pulse. That pulse, boom, pa, boom, pa, boom, pa, boom, pa, boom, pa. The way that we deal with it is that we get started when the music starts. I start on the one when the music starts. I'm concerned about phrasing musically, but then I make sure I take care of that pulse. And I think ultimately the emphasis on the basic step, on the basic idea of anything, is usually by the novice overstated, right? The importance of the actual basic step in dance, in any dance, is to teach you a fundamental principle about that idea, right? What the basic step does for us is give us an avenue, a vein, to get connected to this music. Once you figure that out, the physicality of doing the basic step, and I'm talking about once you figure it out. I'm not talking about 2 years, I'm talking about once you experience it, like we spoke about experiencing something. The basics, you moving your feet in a certain way is almost completely trivial because you're starting to do that everywhere, right? Our instrument is our body. My basic step is everywhere, right? All over. In my ears, in my eyelids, right? I feel those patterns, and I respond to those patterns because somebody at some point told me, honor that pulse in that music, you know? What happens to people is that they hit the ceiling. Any fundamental philosophy is flawed if you can't push it and keep pushing it, right? What happens to one dancer is they hit that ceiling because it's not musically based. When you look at musicians, jazz musicians, Latin musicians, they have a certain freedom. It's something that we look for in life as human beings. We look for that type of freedom. Musicians have that freedom because they understand the structure that you're working with. And if you don't master the structure, you have no freedom, right? So we start to master the understanding of this structure so that we have a certain freedom. That freedom is musical. We're already understanding our physical freedom, which is hard enough, but that freedom is musical. It's because we are connected musically that we experience this feeling of freedom. It's not necessarily a 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. That is such apples, you know, you have 2 apples, you have 3 apples, you have 5 apples. You don't do that in college, right? You don't need apples anymore.